In 1973, noted collector Roger Gross produced a radio tribute to Zinka Milanov with the participation of the diva herself and Philadelphia critic Max de Schauensee. They discussed critical critics and her experiences with conductor Arturo Toscanini. The listener will hear an aria from Aida and the quartet from Rigoletto. Part 2 of 3.
I'm talking this morning with Zinka Milanov and Max de Schauensee. And Mr. de Schauensee, let me quote you once again. We were just talking about this during the performance, which is what reminded me. You said, but the soprano's most striking accomplishment lay in a pianissimo in the highest register, which, when suddenly floated, seemed detached from the singer as it hung in space. This effect has yet to be duplicated. And
well,
you haven't changed
so
your
glad
mind,
you read
have you?
these. No, indeed. I'm very glad you read those, because I do remember, I didn't remember exactly what I'd said, but I remember writing the little article with a great deal of enthusiasm.
Mm.
Yes, and that's why I wanted you to be here today with me, because I appreciated at a very hard time of my career when I was not so appreciated in New York. There are, I said I'm in a company of a very, very, very wonderful critic, and but I must say, in general, they are not so very kind to singers. Many of the critics.
Is that I sort of
and
assumed
this is
that,
sort of a traditional here since Caruso and the old age. There was always some kind of a tradition, that they like to pick on the singer, and this is very sad, because they don't know what they do to a singer.
Wait, just
They
a moment. I was
create complexes,
Am I
by
wrong
saying-
that in thinking that you were immediately acclaimed from the very first at the Metropolitan here? I thought everybody went crazy right from the beginning.
Well, yes, but the critics, I was criticized very much.
For what?
Oh, I don't know. They just they just didn't like certain things, and they suggested things which were not right, I was, and they created complexes, in my body, I was worried, I said that something must be wrong, because they are just saying so many things, and I think this is very big injustice to the artists, because sometimes, when they do that, and I'm a singer myself, and if I go to a concert and like to be honest, I cannot say my criticism about any kind of artist, in one evening. I found this very, very unjust to the artist, because I think you have to know very much about a voice, especially.
In other words, it's
criticize
not
and
right to
suggest-
do it on the basis of one performance.
I think so.
Mr. Schauensee, how do you
I
feel
agree
about
with
that?
that. Well, I said almost as much before. I said you have to go easy on for many reasons, and for instance, it's singing is rather like going to a restaurant. You'll go to a restaurant, you'll be absolutely, it wasn't that marvelous, what a meal. Then you go the next time, and you think, well, it wasn't so good. And it's uneven. I mean, everything else in life is, sometimes you feel better, sometimes you feel worse. And it's the same with a
But
singer.
it must be a standard. Good singing must be
Oh,
always
yes.
a standard.
Yes,
But-
but it varies, and I think you have to, I agree perfectly with Madame Milanov, I think you have to hear a person several times.
But
To judge, because
Yes.
this is you have to have an awful lot of knowledge to say something very decidedly. When you say, well, she's this and that, and she can't do that, or she's this is very dangerous. You
And-
stop the career.
Yeah.
They stopped mine for a few years. It didn't go as well.
so that even an artist
Well,
of
I
your
was
caliber would...
criticized by a few great one very well, like Olin Downs. He always had the most wonderful things to say in
But-
Verdi Requiem with Toscanini and so on.
But you mean that an artist of your caliber and your achievements
Well, I
could
was very
be
unknown,
stalled
when
by
I came to
critics?
this country. I just came as a youngster. I mean, I was quite a young person, a beginner in Metropolitan, and they just.
Was
I'm
your-
afraid to say maybe they didn't know enough themselves,
Did your
and they
brother come with
criticize
you?
according to my age, not to my qualities,
Did your brother come with you? Is it
No,
that
no, he
place?
didn't come. He came in my second part
Second
of
part,
my
mhm.
career.
Well, this is extremely revealing and interesting. I want to, or at least I must do a commercial, and then we'll get back and get back to the music. Before we go, we will have time, it looks like, for one more piece on this first hour. And we have a choice, really, because there are several I want to get to. One is the Rigoletto quartet, and the other the Patria Mia from Aida. So I thought we'd stay with Verdi. Which would you prefer? So I'll have our engineer get ready.
You would like to do both?
Well, I hope eventually to get both, but meanwhile, to finish this first hour, which would you rather have first? Which would you rather make sure that we hear?
Well, I'd leave this to you, you know. I
think Aida.
You'd rather
Yes.
the Aida? All right.
Yes.
Ray, I'm going to do a commercial. While you do it, this is the same recording we just used before, the 25186, and it is, which band? B Band 2. Okay, the Patria Mia. We're back with Zinka Milanov and Max de Schauensee, and we are about to hear the Patria Mia from Aida. And Max de Schauensee, why were you so clear-cut and absolutely certain in your preference for this?
Well, because I think it's one of Madame Milanov's greatest numbers. It shows forth all her qualities, the marvelous pianissimos in the high register, and the style is very correct. It's the way it's the way that aria should be sung, and very often isn't.
Right.
You have a good taste, I think.
Madam Milanov, how did you get away with these pianissimos in the Metropolitan, in a big opera house?
Oh, wonderful. The old house didn't have very good acoustics. But, you know, if the voice is well placed, it came out always beautifully. The pianissimos are sometimes better than the forte, in the old house especially.
Mm-hmm.
Pianissimo went just out, you know, beautiful. Everybody said so.
I remember sitting for some of her performances very far back, and the pianissimos were with you in the seat practically, which is an acoustical thing. I mean, it's if you have the proper placement,
Yes.
there is no
The
trouble.
placement of the voice is very important.
Well, that is a subject that I want to get into later. Not so much the placement of the voice, but the way in which you now teach others to achieve these things. However, that's for our second hour. We're still in our first, and we're going to hear the Patria Mia from Aida, sung by Zinka Milanov. Can't get away from it. That's beautiful singing.
It certainly is. That's a model of its kind.
Yes, really, really extraordinary. And, well, I'm glad you chose to hear this. This is absolutely right. O Patria Mia from Verdi's Aida, and it is, of course, the voice of Zinka Milanov. Renato Cellini conducting. Zinka Milanov is my guest today, together with Max de Schauensee, and we are going to break for the news now, but when we get back, first of all, I think we will hear that Rigoletto quartet anyway, so as not to cheat everybody.
Yeah.
And then two recordings that we'll, very rare collector's items we have, including Zinka Milanov singing folk songs in Yugoslavian. So stand by, we'll be back. We're enjoying a visit today with Zinka Milanov and Max de Schauensee, and well, I'd like to plunge in right where we left off, really, because we had a toss-up between the Aida aria and the Rigoletto quartet, and we just opted for the Aida. Now I want to pick up and hear the Rigoletto. One of the reasons I chose it, Madam Milanov, is that you work here with marvelous colleagues, Leonard Warren, Jan Pierce, Nan Merriman, and of course Toscanini.
Maestro Toscanini.
So it was, Toscanini had a very important role in your own career development, did he not?
Yes, he had.
So could you just remind us of those circumstances and give us your impressions of him?
Well, that was my first trip out of Yugoslavia, actually. I was in Prague, and I sang a performance in the evening, and they asked me if I would go to Vienna and replace somebody, in Aida. And I naturally accepted without thinking twice. And I went next day and I sang Aida with Maestro Bruno Walter. Without a rehearsal, I just went to my dressing room and I sang a performance with Maestro. So after the Nile scene, he came to me and said, "Well, my dear child," he was, always so marvelous, sweet person. I loved him always so much. And sang with him after that so much. And he said after the Nile scene, he said, "My dear child, I don't have to tell you anything else. I would just like to tell you, and that proves how I feel about you." He said, "I would like you, if you would be able to prepare and sing, if you don't sing, Verdi Requiem with Maestro Toscanini." Imagine to sing this Nile scene, this excitement, Maestro Walter. Well, I said, I don't know the part, and I never sang, and I was so young, I never heard. You know, in Yugoslavia, there is, you don't hear a requiem, so you don't hear, because this is a special big ensemble which you need, and a great conductor. And so he said, oh, I guarantee you it's absolutely for you. I only would like you to make the audition for Maestro Toscanini. So I said, well, I didn't even, I said, well, we said, we'll let you know, So I went back, back to Yugoslavia early in the spring. And they called me up, and I was asked to come to Maestro and to Salzburg and to make my audition. And I was preparing fast, I prepared the whole thing with my brother in 1 week, the whole part, and this is very difficult. It was something new for me, I never sang this kind of special style for it. And I prepared, and I thought Maestro will let me sing the whole part, I went there, Maestro Toscanini was there, and Leinster was his assistant at that time. And he played for me, and Maestro listened, and I thought I would be singing it at least an hour, He opened the music, he said, oh, just here, and when I saw Maestro Toscanini, you can imagine, I was so frightened, I thought I would be not able to produce one sound. So, but I was well prepared, and I collect myself. That was my characteristic, in my rest of my life later on, And I sang for him just maybe altogether 20 bars. He closed the book and he said, va bene, you are engaged, And I was right away engaged, naturally, and that was the story of Maestro, And then a year after that, he came to America, and I was engaged with him again and again, and I sang at least 20 times with Maestro. Missa Solemnis also in London and in South America, and Requiem.
Didn't you do
and then in 1944 I sang this quartet, the whole act from the last. And that's the time when he said that I'm ideal for Rigoletto.
Didn't you sing the Requiem with Toscanini first in Salzburg?
In Salzburg, yeah. That's why I made my trip to make the audition in Salzburg. That's where I auditioned.
Yes.
Toscanini had this reputation of being such a difficult man with his instrumentalists, of throwing things and losing his temper and so forth.
How did he? Singers too.
That's what I wanted to know. Was he
but he
better
was
with
marvelous to me. It was magnificent to me. He was so sweet, and he never raised his voice. And when I sang with him in the rehearsals, with Maestro Toscanini, you had to sing always with full voice. There is no monkey business about half a whispering or something. That's not possible with Maestro. So we sang. I sang with him then the orchestra rehearsal, naturally, and not one, few for the first appearance. And I sang the B flat, this famous B flat in Requiem, the finale, a cappella, and I hold it not too long, I was afraid. And he stopped and he said, "Ma perché? Why?" He said, when he was excited, he talked 3 languages: German and English and Italian, naturally. And I said, "Maestro, I heard that you don't like long fermatas, long holding the notes too long, that you are very particular about this, and you don't like the prima donnas who are free to hold as long as they want." And he said, no, he said, when you sing the way you do, I'll just wait for you as long as you want,
Oh, very nice.
He stopped me, he wanted me to sing, hold it long.
Now, what was the occasion of this Rigoletto last act? What was the idea of it? It was a Red Cross concert?
Yes, this was a Red Cross, for American Red Cross, 1944.
And what else was on the program? What happened beyond that?
Oh, we had on the program a sick pretty deal, and Maestro loved Wagner to conduct, and the whole act, you know, and Siegfried Idyll, I don't remember anymore.
And it was at
But,
the Madison Square Garden, the old one at 50th Street.
yes, but the recording has this Toscanini and Verdi, you know, this is where this is.
Well, here is the quartet, and in addition to Zinka Milanov, of course, Jan Pierce starts it out, then you'll hear Leonard Warren, Nan Merriman, and of course Arturo Toscanini conducting the NBC.
La figlia dell'amore, schiavo son dei mezzi tuoi, con un detto sai, le mie pene consolar. Vieni e senti del mio cuore il frequente palpitar. Non detto sai, tu vuoi le mie pene consolar.
Corre che te fai questa poco. Sì, allora, amore, ando valga il vostro gioco, ne vedete soppettare. E pur,
Oggi piangere non può.
Quartet from Rigoletto, and quite a quartet it was. Zinka Milanov, Leonard Warren, Jan Pierce, and Nan Merriman, with Arturo Toscanini conducting.